Well, we're going into the second session of this afternoon's network meetings, and we very intentionally put these two sessions side by side. So a session thinking about power and how easily and readily we abuse power, and therefore the importance of accountability within healthy leadership and healthy organizations. And it's an absolute delight for me to welcome and introduce Mirek Pieszka. Mirek is based in Poland, not very far from where we would have been meeting if we were meeting in person. And I've had the pleasure and privilege of working alongside Mirek in his role as the Director of Governance Development for IFES, International Fellowship of Evangelical Students. IFES is a movement that I hold close to my heart because I was part of the student ministry, the student movement in South Africa back in the 80s, and have some involvement with the UK movement, UCCF, here in the UK as a board member now. But to work alongside Mirek as he has headed up a global program of governance development that has done wonders in terms of establishing both a good culture of governance practices and board practices, but as importantly, a whole culture of governance development so that boards actually accept that developing healthy governance is part of their role and responsibility, is the work that Mirek has undertaken with his team in IFES. So Mirek, welcome. Hand over to you to take us through this.
Jen, thank you for this very warm welcome. And well, I got almost embarrassed by all these things you've been sharing about me. But I mean, from my side, I can say it's a big honor and privilege to work alongside you at so many occasions, Jen. Yes, I would like to take you all into the second part of the meeting of this session, afternoon session today, which is about healthy organizational governance. And actually, the question from Catherine, which we heard before the break, was a very strong introduction to this part of our meeting and this afternoon. Marcus' presentation was very powerful, and I hope to be able to put it a bit into practice of not only parachurch context, non-governmental organizations or faith-based organizations, but also the principles, ideas I'll be talking about will definitely apply to the church context as such. We are, by the way, we are all church through capital C, so parachurch and local fellowship like congregations, we are all one church. I would like to suggest that almost like a subtitle for this session is a quote from Matthew 25, to which I will refer a bit later also. Well done, good and faithful servant. In our governance program in IFES, and sorry, but you'll see the IFES logo on the screen all the time. So I'm sure that many of us are familiar with the student ministry. But in our governance program for IFES, we use this quote from Matthew 25 often in a slightly different way. We say, well done, good and faithful board member. It brings like the concept, the whole idea of governance and the board or church council. It brings relationships and structures together. And as a matter of fact, in IFES, we use this diagram to illustrate this concept, this understanding. Number one is, or one of the aspects of the IFES ministry and of any other faith-based organization or church, the fact that we are the movement. In our case, this is student initiative, but we are also a fellowship, and there are relationships are absolutely fundamental and very important. But there is this one more perspective, one more angle from which we can look at this, what we do, either in the context of the local church or the organization, ministry of other kinds, is the aspect of organization, whether we like it or not. If you want our ministry to continue to outgrow our own generation, it must be put into structure, and there must be governance and leadership you are talking about. So to put it in this diagram in a little bit like a broader context, we can, instead of saying or putting on top a movement, we can say a ministry, and there are people involved. Everything is in God's hands, so God holds it all together. So in the middle, we would have a logo of our church or of our other organization. But there is this angle which we are not always very happy about, like to give our energy into, but absolutely crucial and fundamental for making our ministry impactful and going from one generation to the next. So governance and structure. If we want to ask, you want to talk about governance more specifically, there are different definitions, and let me share this particular one. And I'm sharing it now with a trembling heart, because we use the word power, the concept of power. And let me read it to you. The exercise of power, governance. Governance is the exercise of power to lead and guide an organization, or I would add a church, in the effective and efficient execution of its mission, and to ensure appropriate levels of accountability and transparency to its stakeholders. Accountability, transparency. Marcus was talking so much and deeply about this topic. And I would like us to look at this element of power in the first line in a positive way, positive sense. We can also say that this is like the exercise of privilege of serving through leading and guiding an organization, leading and guiding organization entrusted to us. What stands out very strongly to me in these few lines is leading and guiding, and execution of mission, but then also these two elements of accountability and transparency to the stakeholders. What I would add to it is what we put next to this definition in our IFES student ministry context, is that we understand core values of good governance as Christ-centered, Bible-based, relationship-driven, expertise-supported. Yes, we want to learn even from the NGO world, even from some management books, although the best manual is the Bible itself in this topic, on this topic. And this is strategy-focused and thus equipping for impactful ministry. So this is how we understand governance. If I was to share like few more like illustrations on this topic of governance, how to understand, let me share maybe three before we actually get to the Bible, to this best governance manual. Charles Handy, one of the experts in the area of governance and management, in Harvard Business Review some time ago, he wrote about separation of powers and made a comparison between corporate or non-corporate organizations, comparing them with separation of powers. We come, I believe, all of us, we come from democratic political context. So we are aware of the parliament and government and high court or supreme court. So the board in the or the church council would be the equivalent of the parliament, so legislative function. But then management, like director or staff workers, and volunteers maybe also. This will be the equivalent of the government, and then high or Supreme Court would be the equivalent of the audit committee in our faith-based context. But another very powerful illustration I learned years ago, how to understand governance, is the illustration of the ship, where the board, of course, remembering that God is the owner of it all, but for the sake of understanding the concept of governance, board would be the owner of the ship, national director or director of the organization, or the pastor would be the captain of the ship, staff team would be a crew. So board decides on the final destination where the cargo should be taken, but how to get through the rough waters, seas or oceans on the daily basis, this is captain and his or her team. Very simple illustration, but I believe that it can help us to get it even better, the concept. And maybe one more before we move on is the illustration of the river, and the board, the governance role in our ministries would be to keep the current of water, which is the ministry, to stay within the river bed. So we define the parameters like board policies to get the water flowing, staying within the river bed. And we keep our hands away from the water. We allow the people we hired, pastor or the director of the organization, to run the ministry, and we support, we protect, and we provide the guidance, vision and mission. This is what we secure for the organization which was entrusted to us. But as I said, and we also heard yesterday, some biblical examples of leadership and governance. So these are just a few on this screen, on this slide here. So Exodus, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, helped Moses to set a structure to make his service more efficient. And Numbers, again, we see the Moses in the situation where he is on the edge of the burnout, or maybe he is already in the phase of the burnout of his leadership life, and the Lord brings to him 70 people, 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people, to share the burden. Again, so there is this group of people who are to help Moses running the nation of the people of Israel. And also, yeah, I mean, just very shortly touch on these great, absolutely fantastic passages. But to mention maybe one more from Acts 6, this is again just like a division of like roles and responsibilities. The deacons are appointed to care for the widows who felt neglected, who were neglected. The Hellenistic Jews were complaining, and so there are a lot of passages in the Bible which bring the structure into relationship, which bring the structure into leading, serving the Lord, leading the people, his people, or leading the ministry. But there is one more which I would like to spend a little bit more time now. And this is Acts 15, again, New Testament, again, book of Acts. And in our governance training, we call it like the first board meeting. Of course, this is the council, the council at Jerusalem, Acts 15 from 1 through 35. And it was so good to study together, but I would like to bring some highlights to you, what we can learn from this council at Jerusalem to the practice of good governance, which will or should and will protect us from abusing the power or authority given or entrusted to us. So let me take you very quickly through some of these points here. There was a major important issue. So as a board, you don't spend time on minor issues, circumcision or to be saved by grace. So this was the issue that we're looking at. There was a lot of discussion. It was not just one person running the meeting and making a conclusion at the end. There was a lot of discussion, space for different opinions, even those from the Pharisees. They had a chance to share their view. Big picture, things were put in the context and they were active, serious in listening to the facts and evidence from the field. So the case was examined in the light of the scriptures and also from the experience from the field. So there was at the end, towards the end of this meeting, very clear leadership with the decision made. We read in verses 19 through 21, in my judgment, James is concluding the long discussion. It was not just one short session, but it was a really long process of coming to this conclusion. But then a very interesting point, they reached a consensus and in the letter to the churches, they explain it's good to us having become one mind. Apostles, the leaders, the church, one mind. Summarized, everything was summarized in writing. This is a very good principle for board to put decisions in writing. And all done in the context of community. I already mentioned the whole church, but probably one of the most amazing verses from this passage is 28, where we read the Holy Spirit as speaks through personal experience. So the Holy Spirit and us, we have made this decision. So if we approach things with prayer, with our godly attitude, seeking God first, then at the end of the day, when the decision is made, we can say, Holy Spirit and us, we've made this decision. So, but the meeting was very structured. One person was speaking, others were silent, listening to the person. So there was no chaos. It was in the Middle East, but very structured, a very structured process of reaching a conclusion in writing. And this is something from what we are benefiting from, what we are being blessed until today as the church, that we are saved by grace and not by circumcision following the Mosaic law. So governance, this is about exercising power in the positive sense to lead and guide and protect the organization, the church, entrusted to us. And I'm sure that if anyone of you studied maybe management or has got already some experience in running his or her organization or being part of the organization, we are aware that there are different types of boards. Just to highlight the two: governing board, and this is what we are talking about now, the highest authority in the organization. Again, I want to emphasize it that I want to speak about these issues like authority or power in the positive sense, and we have the ultimate decision authority. There are also board of advisors, which are very helpful, very useful to use the wisdom and the insights of people who are supporting us in our work. But this all brings us to from the big picture of what governance is all about, and the board as such, to the concept of a board member who can be called like a trustee of fiduciary, a person who has undertaken to act in the interest of another person who manages some assets. And this is all very, very close to the biblical concept of stewardship. Someone who is managing another's property. And there will be a long list of biblical stewards: Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Esther, Daniel, Paul, and of course we could go through a New Testament also. Esther would be a very special case here, because it was not only about physical assets, but she was a steward of the opportunity given to her, a position of stewardship to save her people. And I'm sure that you know the story very, very well. But then what I started with this part of our session is the Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, or I would call it like the parable of the stewardship. And it talks about the mindset of a board member who heard from the master, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And again, very quickly, we see that the mindset, the attributes of wise stewards, good board members, are so special. And my prayer is that we would be able to go up to this standard. So we know that God owns it all, that it doesn't belong to us, but we are only the stewards. We are single-minded, we are faithful, we are accountable, hardworking, we pursue excellence, wise and expectant. So this is something what I would like us all to remember. Matthew 25, this is a wonderful passage bringing us to better understanding of the mindset and attributes of wise stewards. God owns it all. We are just entrusted with the ministry, with the church, whatever activity we are involved in. This is His, it belongs to Him. We've been entrusted with this thing to care for it for the sake of His kingdom. So I started with the diagram, this triangle, and we can see that governance and structure, stewardship and structure, these things go together hand in hand. But this is not the same, governance and structure or management, if you allow me to use this terminology, governance and management. There are specific roles, there are very specific roles of governance and management. And to run the impactful ministry, we need to be careful to be able to keep these two separate. So governance basically answers the question what, and management would be answering the question how. So if we have an organization, faith-based organization, NGO, we have usually very simple structures, board of the organization, and CEO, chief executive officer, or director, or full-time person running the ministry. So governance, the board decides about the direction and works hard to protect the ministry, and the management, the person running on the daily basis the ministry, is concerned about the question of how. This is about implementation and reporting, reporting to the board. From our IFES experience, we see there are different stages. Sometimes the governance would be taken more like a leading role. And at another stage, at another season, it will be maybe a management, which will be more actively involved in running the whole entity, the organization, or the church also. And if you look at these two diagrams, diagram on the left, A, shows that the board is in place first. Diagram on the right, B, shows that director, staff is in place first. But at the end of the day, there must be a right distinction and the right proportions between governance, which is in yellow here, or blue, leadership and operations. We cannot mess these things up, and we look a bit closer at this issue in the moment of keeping these two separate. And again, referring to our IETS experience, for example, IETS national student movements in Central Eastern Europe were usually pioneered by individuals, like staff, I would say staff workers. So this would be the scenario B. So there was a pioneer first, and then he or she would build the necessary structure of the ministry, of the organization, and would be, this person would be the pioneer, would be recruiting board. But in some other contexts, there would be a board established first, which would be hiring, employing, seeking for the best person in the country to hire as the national director or a full-time person to run the ministry. And of course, we can say that there are possible pitfalls in all both scenarios. Sometimes the board, scenario A, is not releasing operations work to management soon enough, or scenario B, the pioneer would be recruiting supportive friends to the board, and then this is definitely not a healthy, not a good situation, because we want to have the structure where accountability exercised really healthy and not to be protected by our friends only, but by people who will be asking like direct good questions also at us. So very quickly, there are 4 mandates for the effective, highly effective ministry board: direction, capacity, performance, and governance. Direction, capacity, performance, and governance. Core mandates. Very quickly, direction. This is about the direction we are heading. So this is about the vision, about the mission, strategic direction. We look into the future. At the board level, governance level, we approve the strategic and operating plans of the organization, like the ship illustration, and we allow the captain and the crew to implement it on a daily basis. Capacity, we look for the best person available, for the role of a national director or the full-time person or a pastor. For the congregation, for the church, we evaluate this person's performance, provide needed support, and ensure the organization has sufficient capacity and resources also. We do not point only those who are full-time in the ministry, but we also help, but this will be another topic for another session, securing sufficient resources and capacity. But performance, we provide financial organizational oversight, accountability for ethical and legal conduct. We do it through written policies and procedures. Again, let me repeat it again, all based on the biblical teaching, how we should relate to each other. And some of these examples I shared earlier, or we heard yesterday, Jen sharing the Bible is teaching us about biblical, like good, effective structures, procedures, and this is where we learn these things from. But the last one, the last mandate is about the board itself, and looking at or supporting and guiding the organization. We should not forget about ourselves. We should grow in good governance. So we should regularly evaluate our performance before evaluating others who are in the organization. We should be able to establish effective structures, recruit, again, really good, or I would say the best board members with the right composition, etc. And this all like the board of the organization or the church council, it doesn't operate in the vacuum. We are part of different relationships. There are stakeholders, there is management which is answerable to the board, and we are board colleagues. And we in IFES or in your own ministry, you would be able to identify a lot of stakeholders which make it clear to us that we are not in the vacuum. We are serving God in the first place, but so many others, including the society, employees, even the national, local government, and in our case, this would be, forgive me mentioning IFES here again. We heard from Marcus already about accountability, but the other side of the coin, when we talk about relationships, is trust. And again, trust is so essential to our impactful and healthy organization or church we are part of, or which we are serving, or for which we are responsible as stewards. Trust is the belief that those on whom we depend will meet our positive expectations, not only makes expectations in general, but positive expectations. And it means that I can put my money, career, time, demands, and expectations in your hands with complete confidence, and that you will not take unfair advantage of me, so that you will not misuse the relationship I built with you. So I feel safe in the relationship with you. Again, I'm sure that many of you heard about Stephen Covey, and maybe you even read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Covey comes up with a wonderful, amazing illustration. He talks about trust accounts. So like bank account, trust account here. So we make deposits in these 3 categories: character, competence, concern. And we do withdrawals. And we play with it. Until the moment when, I don't know whether it happened to you, when you were hoping to pay with your plastic card, credit card, or debit card, that the message was transaction denied because the account is overdrawn. And actually, it happens also in our trust relationships, in the relationships with others, between the board and the management, staff workers, or the board and stakeholders, those whom we are supposed to serve. And it's so easy to overdraw an account, but to rebuild it, it takes ages. You can ruin it within a day or so, one accident, but to rebuild it. So you have to be really careful how we maintain the trust relationship with others. And Marcus talks so much about accountability, so I will not spend much time on it, but One of these illustrations at the beginning of this session was the illustration of the river. And this was the illustration which was telling us about the policy governance. Of course, that in the church, we are saved by grace, and this is love on which our relationships are built with the Lord and with our, and with other believers. But there are also frameworks. There is a framework for us to function as a church, as an organization, as an initiative for the kingdom we are part of. So the river was showing us how to keep the ministry within the riverbed. So this is another illustration, a bowl of the bowls, which when we look from above at them, it shows the outside boundary, the outer boundary, that this is how we keep all the ministry together, and we give space for people to work within these boundaries on daily basis. So there is the board authority, national or director authority, or the full-time person authority. And the distance between the outer boundary and the next one defines the authority that the board retains for itself. So this yellow arrow shows here. So we protect the ministry by designing the framework, but then we allow the people to use the gifts, to use their skills for the sake of the kingdom within the area we've been called to serve in. And there are also these hats we should be aware of as board members, and the case study of Patrick visiting Mali on his business trip. If you want to serve there, we put the volunteer hat and maybe implementer hat when we are given this authority by the whole board. Otherwise, we wear the governance hat, and only when we sit in the meeting room, church council, or the board of the organization, then we wear this hat. So some simple concepts, ideas, but I believe that they will help us to understand the differences between governance and management, our role on the board, and those who run the ministry on a daily basis. Again, there will be a lot to speak about governance principles. We should be speaking with one voice, like Acts 15. We govern, not manage. Board chair is the leader of the board, not the leader of the staff, etc. Maybe one more thing which I believe is very important to mention here is that we need to keep this strategic focus at the governance level. We look into the future. I've been saying it, repeating it a few times so far. We are not driven by urgency. We leave solving the problems of day-to-day ministry to the people we hired or who are part of the ministry as staff workers or volunteers, but we secure the direction. So it's like flying the plane when it is possible to fly again. Yes, so we'll experience this perspective like 10,000 meter, a long time frame, mindset, strategic, and we are building the organization. We look into the future. So this is external versus internal, future versus present, outcomes versus activity, large relevant issues like Acts 15 again versus small trivial ones, proactive versus reactive. So this is what I would like to maybe finish with, that this is the diagram which we developed in IFTS, and as you can see, it's all based on faithful obedience, God's grace, and enabling. Then solid governance, confident leadership, healthy groups or field ministry. We can use whatever description of the ministry we are involved in. And then impactful ministry. We can see we can experience impactful ministry. So based on God's grace and enabling, all these layers are built on it, with the foundational being solid governance. And making this session like a testimony of our experience, there is this testimony, a wonderful quote from Mukululi Nyube, who is the national director of IFTS student ministry in Eswatini, which is a tiny, small country, almost inside of South Africa, bordering with Mozambique. And once Mukululi has said that legacy I would like to leave to my successor is a strong and good governance culture. You cannot be an effective ministry without the strong governance foundation. And really, unless we leave a governance structure behind that is able to function without us, I think we'll be doing a disservice to our nations and national movements or organizations. I like that he puts here here nations, not only our small congregation or our maybe the organization, but being poor with good governance, we are doing a disservice to our nations. And I like it because it helps us to have this big picture that we are not only serving these people in need, what the Lord called us to, but through serving those people in a godly way, with good governance in place, we are serving the whole nation, and we are blessing going much beyond our immediate reach of our ministry. And I think that I will stop here, and there will be these questions: how healthy is your governance? How could it develop from here? But we still have like about 10 minutes for, and I see there are some questions in the chat box. But as it were, as a like picture or the word of encouragement, let me share you one photo which I took at the Frankfurt airport one time. And there were some reconstructions, some works at the airport, and there was this banner: the road to success is always under construction. So even if we are not at the good governance yet, or there is still a way to go, may this word be like this quote be of encouragement to us, that the road to success, godly success, biblical success, is always under a construction.